So today I'm going to make an Appa bag. I am going to make a little purse that is kind of in the shape of Appa, like a simplified purse shape. Yeah, I'm gonna go get started. So this is my basic outline for myself. So basically what I want to do is the purse is going to be shaped more or less like Appa's head. The flap here is going, or the arrow here is actually going to be the flap, and there'll be a little magnet closure here underneath the arrow. So the arrow kind of opens and closes the gap at the top. But there's also going to be a zipper at the top so that the whole thing can be opened and closed. And then these on the side here are going to be, these are going to be where you clip on the strap. If I can use the fake fur, then that's what I'm going to use. And then I'll line it with different fabric that'll be a little easier to deal with than fur. I think I'm also going to put a pocket on the inside. Yeah, I'm going to start drawing it out and making the pattern. And of course, once I finish with the pattern and make it, I will make that pattern available to all of you on my website. This is what I was going to try to use for the bag. Now, so this is the bag, and I need a front and a back. So I have enough. If I do one here and one sideways, which is not usually how you want to do first off. So if you look on this side, the fur has a direction. See, it goes this way. So really I would want like top of the bag, bottom of the bag. So having one that is going this way and then one that is going this way is really not ideal. But the other thing that I could do is have the front of it being like this, and then cut two halves. Obviously I'll need seam allowance on the side here. And cut two halves and do it like that. So I think I'll have one like this, and then I'll have the two, and I'll have to sew them together in the middle, and I'll just have to deal with the fur, because fur is kind of a pain to use anyway. So okay, well I think I'm going to use this fabric for the arrow and the side of the bag. And then I have, where did I put it? I'm just using a plain fabric for the lining. So these are the fabrics I'm using, and we'll go forward from there. I'll show you how to cut out fur, because you can't just with the fur you can't just like put the pattern down and cut around the side. You actually have to like trace it and then do like small snips, so that you don't want to cut all of these fur fibers as you go. So you have to be a lot more careful cutting it. I will show you how to do that. Now you can't just slice it like normal fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this. Now here's the tricky part, kind of tricky. You want to try to cut this backing without cutting the fur, like as much as is possible. You're not gonna do 100% do that, but that's the goal. You just don't want to create too many blunt ends. So if you cut this like straight across, you'll get like a blunted edge to all of your fur pieces. So you're trying to not do that. So you want to try to cut real close, like little snips right close. See, like this, little snips that are very close to its edge, so that you're cutting just the backing as much as possible, and then the fur just cuts off with the backing. Some people will use a razor blade to try to do this. I have tried that in the past, and like the blade just gets blunt so fast. Like I'd be able to do maybe this much before I had to switch to a new blade. That I don't think that really works very well. That's like one of those little hacks that I don't think is real. So I prefer to just do little snips like this, like real close to the surface with the scissors. And as much as possible, I messed up a little bit here, but you want to actually be on the inside of this line that you drew. Okay, so I finished cutting it out. And as you can see, I still have the long strands. Most of you are just going to do this same thing twice, since I am dealing with a scrap of fur that is not quite big enough. I have to do this on hard mode and do it 2 more times. You want to make sure that you're going with the fur in the right direction. So this is the top and this is the bottom. Alright, remember you stick with that. This is an extra step for me. You probably don't have to do this if you had enough fabric, but I have to sew these together. Now, one tip that I have when you are sewing fur or faux fur, it is a good idea to kind of comb the fur to the inside, because as little fur as you can get stuck in the seam, the better, because you gotta pull it all out later. Right sides together, and you'll sew, well, you might not, but sew down the length, sew them together. And then all you have to do to try to hide that seam is to like comb the fur over it so that you can barely tell that there's even a seam there. So now I've got my completed front and back pieces. I am going to go ahead and cut out the fabric for the rest of the pieces. And then I will meet back up when we're going to start putting it together. So you're going to apply interfacing to the side piece. Oh, here it is. Now what I'm doing here is I didn't have quite a long enough piece, so I'm just piecing it together. Remember, you can always do that. Especially, like, this is just going to be the bottom of the bag, so no one's going to see if there's a little tiny crease there. And the other pieces I'm interfacing are going to be the lining. So I applied interfacing to the lining pieces instead of to the fur pieces of this one. Applying interfacing to fur pieces, the back foam doesn't always stick very well. So in this case, I'm applying interfacing to the lining pieces instead. We will get back to the lining after we finish the outer shell of the bag. We're going to add the side piece. So it'll go like this. And just like last time, before you sew it, before you sew the fur to anything, you want to comb it to the inside away from the seam. And then you're going to sew this right sides together all along the edge. You'd want to leave the seam allowance of this, because we have a seam allowance on this piece. We want to leave that part unsewn. And you'll do the same thing with this one. So you do it, sew it to this one, sew it around the edge, and then you'll sew this one again right sides together. Obviously comb this to the inside and then sew it. Okay, so as you can see, I have it now attached to the side, right sides together. Let's turn it to the right side. Make sure you want to make sure that the fur doesn't get stuck in the seam. These are going to be the tabs on the sides of the bag that hold the strap. So what we want to do is fold it in half. We're basically going to do this like a belt carrier. So fold it in half, try to get a little crease there. And then you're going to fold both sides to the center of the crease, like that. I'm going to actually press this in place, but I don't have a camera set up by my ironing board. So fold that in place, and then you're going to fold it in half. So it's just like double fold bias tape. And then you are going to press that in place and then sew it closed. So you want to sew these in 2 lines, and then we're going to fold them in half like this, because these are going to end up being loops for the strap. So get your bag. Oh, let me zoom out a little. Fold it in half, and then you're going to baste it on both sides of the bag like that, down on the sides. All right, so now you can see on the sides here, we have the little loops sewn in place on both sides. So now we're going to move on to the flap. This is going to be the flap that goes over the purse, and you just want to cut out some interfacing and put that on the wrong side of one of the pieces. Before you sew these together, you want to get the magnet in place. Keep 1/2 of the magnet aside, because that's going to be attached to the purse in a little bit. You want to sew this to the side that has the interfacing. So this is the magnet sewn in place. Now the next step is to sew your arrow together, the 2 pieces with right sides together. Keep the top edge open. You don't have to, you're not going to sew this, just that. All right, so now you have your arrow, you have it sewn front to back. Clip into these corners here. Make sure you do not cut the stitching. And from here you have this part open, and you want to turn it to the right side. Okay, so I turned it to the right side here. I'm going to press it and top stitch it so that now we have our arrow flap ready. So what we want to do to cover up this raw edge, we're going to stitch it on. So this is the back. For me, this is the side that I have too. So you're going to stitch it onto the back about 1 inch down from the top. And you're going to stitch it close to the edge there, because then once we have the stitches, we're going to basically flip it over the stitches and then stitch it again. Sew that in place. Remember, the magnet is face up right now, and this is the back of the bag. So we have it like this, as you can see. I stitched it right there. That is about 1/4 inch from the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over that way, so that now we're covering that raw edge. And you're going to just do another stitch about 1/4 inch from the end here, and that will completely cover those raw edges from the inside. So now, as you can see, I have it top stitched along the back here, and it covers up that seam. So now we can flip this over to the front, and then I line up so I see where the magnet is here, and I say, okay, that's where I want the flap to go. That's where the flap's going to go on the final bag. So I'm going to, so that's where I'm going to sew the other side of the magnet, because that's where the flap hits. As you can see, sew the other side of the magnet there, so that then you can just do that. There we go. So that's what it's gonna look like. I want to include a zipper in this bag. So these are the zipper band pieces. Which way? Place the zipper face down on one of the bands.
Can you see that?
On one of the bands like this. And then you are going to, once it's sewn here, you're going to press the band away so you'll have the exposed teeth there in the middle. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other side, placing the whole thing face down and then pressing it away. Okay, so now you can see we have the zipper. And I like to top stitch right on the edge there to just keep this part pressed away. So the next step is to get the top lining pieces sewn in place. Place them face down on the edge of the zipper and sew. And do that on both sides. So you'll sew this one here and you'll sew this one on this side. That's how the top of your lining, the zipper part of your lining should work. All right, the first thing for the pocket piece is you want to make sure that you hem the top. So fold over the hem allowance, which was 1 inch. So you want to hem the top of it. So I have a 1 inch hem allowance here. So I'm gonna fold it over and then do a narrow hem like that. Then you want to fold over the seam allowance on the sides of the pocket and baste them in place. So now you have basted the sides of the pocket here. You've basted them back. The top is hemmed. So now what we want to do is sew it to one of the lining pieces. And you're going to center this and you're going to stitch it around the edge. And then you can pull out your basting stitches once it is sewn along the edge there. Okay, so I have the pocket sewn on here. You just have to sew it onto the back. Vertically is the inside of the bag. So if we want this to be the inside of the bag, so this is the outside, that's the inside. That means this part needs to be face down here. So basically you're sewing it top of the bag, top of the lining, and bottom of the lining together with right sides together, except the zipper is going to be in between. So now, as you can see, we have the zipper with the lining. So top of the lining is on top of the zipper, the bottom of the lining is underneath the zipper. So we have it like this, and I have left the seam allowance here unsewn. So the seam allowance on the side you want to keep free. So turn the bag to the wrong side. And open the zipper. We're going to sew the lining to the bag, to this part of the bag. I'm going to tuck the lining, as it is so far, into the bag. Should be going away from the top, and you're going to sew just along the edges of the bag here. So the sides are still going to be unsewn. So now I've sewn it on the upper edge here, and the other thing that I've done is I pull as I understitched it. So you pull this out, pull each side of the lining out, and you stitch it right along the edge there. Right along the edge, you stitch the lining to the seam allowance. So this will help it get a clean edge when we end up turning it to the right side. So let me show you now what it's going to do. What that's going to do is keep the lining down on the inside here. So it's going to keep this edge nice and clean. See that? It just makes it automatically sit. Okay, so now we're back where we were. And what we have to do is we still need to add the side to the lining. So pull the lining out like this. And what we're going to do from this point is you are going to sew the side to the lining here, making sure you want to keep the seam allowance separate. You want to keep the seam allowance unsewn, so we're just sewing up to here, keeping the seam allowance separate, and we're sewing it around the edges. you're going to leave a gap in the stitches all along this base because you're going to need to turn the bag to the right side through this gap. So leave a gap. Don't sew like from here to here on one of the sides of the lining. Okay? Okay, so you've sewn the lining layer together, the side of the lining. Don't forget, you're leaving a gap. You want to tuck the lining back inside the bag so it's still wrong side out. And we need to sew up the sides with the zipper in between. And then remember that gap you had in the lining? Now you want to pull your bag through that gap to get it to the right side. Sew up the gap in the lining here. After you sew up that gap, tuck the lining into the bag. Clip on a strap and you're finished. This is a strap I made for a previous project. If you look up the strawberry purse tutorial, then it's the same exact strap that I used for that. But you can really use whatever strap you want for this. And now you're finished. Well, I will put the pattern that I made for this. I'll put it on my website. You can follow the link in the description below. It's totally free. You don't have to give me your email or anything. It's just there to download. Yeah, get creative because you can do cool things too.